Hey, what's going on there, folks? Good evening. Welcome back here to this Friday night. Friday night here on the Earthmaster channel. November 24th, 2023. It's about 11:39 p.m. here, California time. Latest activity looks like a 1.1. Very small earthquake there into the big island of Hawaii. We did see a little bit of uptick here across the west coast. Well, south of the Baja California region with a 4.2 coming in. South of the border area. Also some movement striking up there into the Kansas area. Beautiful state of Kansas. Going to cover first the activity there in the Iceland region. Last 12 hours, 112 earthquakes of activity. Now, this is a slight uptick, mainly in a region to the northeast of the Grindavik area. Now, this is still along the divergent boundary, the rift zone, so to speak. So, this is kind of interesting here because I'm starting to think maybe we're seeing more of a dynamic setup here across this divergent boundary, across this rift zone. Maybe it's not just limited to the Grindavik area or the Reykjanes region of Iceland. It might be on a more broader scale because this earthquake activity looks as though it's migrating much further to the north with a huge cluster of earthquake activity here in this region. I'm kind of curious to see what the Icelandic Met Office will say about this. But far as movement down here across the Grindavik area, well, as you can see, there's only a handful of earthquakes. Things have kind of died off here for the most part in the last couple days, well, probably the last few days. But as you can see here, further uptick and further movement here across this area of Iceland. There's obviously quite a few volcanoes across this rift zone. This will be something to watch pretty closely because, well, for one, maybe we'll see some further activity up along this area in terms of further volcanic movement. The latest information statement here from the Icelandic Met Office from earlier this morning shows that the unchanged situation based on the latest information here shows that there's it looks like about 650 earthquakes near the dike intrusion. That's the magma intrusion area of Iceland. So that basically their interpretation here is that things are calming down specifically in this area. But who's to say we're not going to see further elevated movement, potentially further up along that divergent boundary, well northeast of the Grindavik area. The likelihood of a volcanic eruption at some location along the length of the magma intrusion persists, but the likelihood of an imminent volcanic eruption diminishes with time. So I'm kind of curious to see what they'll say tomorrow about this increasing earthquake activity well north of the Grindavik area. Kind of, just a little separate swarm. You can pretty much follow this area in terms of rift zones across this region here. A lot of volcanic activity potential in that region. All right, let's look here. USGS is not reporting anything here in the Gulf of California in terms of this four-pointer that struck here, fairly recent 4.2 into the Baja California area. So just a heads up, keep an eye on the SoCal area. We do have some plate adjustment going on down here, just south here. But far as anything major going on here across Southern California, let's look at the 2.5 map and above. There's not a whole lot. We do have some activity, obviously stretching up here. And this has been very interesting watching this activity stirring up here around the southern edge of the Cascadia subduction zone. We've seen some elevated movement taking place here in the last few days here off the coast of Northern California, and some specifically right here along the Cascadia. Obviously, the Cascadia is a major mega threat in terms of reshaping the West Coast, so to speak, in terms of the the population density out here. For one, when this 9-pointer pops out here, folks, it's not going to be any joke. It's going to be a big time event. Last major earthquake out here along the Cascadia back in 1700. Just a matter of time before things return back to normal following 323 years of built-up pressure. So, a couple earthquakes here specifically along the Cascadia. Let's see what we got for tremor. I'm kind of curious about that. See what we have here. Zero, zip zero, nada is being reported here. But let's see what we had yesterday. We had a little bit here in Northern California. So it looks as though a very small amount here. This is underneath Northern California, about 35, 45 kilometers into the Cascadia subduction zone. This is not surface quake activity. These are tremors occurring well down into the subduction zone area. So that's kind of where we're seeing this built up stress here in this region. So that leads me to believe here, and this could be just a little theory, that maybe the area is so tightly wound up here that the tremor has died down tremendously, if you really think about it, since about October of last year. We haven't seen any major spike in tremor. So that tells me right there that, well, maybe things are close to showing some movement out here along the Cascadia in terms of larger scale activity, because it seems as though any type of little tremor that's occurring down into the subduction zone really strains the area upstream, and that's where we see these further earthquakes taking place. So I think things are really wound up here in this area of the Cascadia. Don't know when it's going to go, but we look at these little signs, right? The decline in tremor activity. If you look at the last data, our last major tremor event was back in October of last year, this little spike. Since then, well, we've had a couple episodes of tremor, somewhat elevated with a few hundred back in March and April. But since then, if you really think about it, this past year and a couple months have been very quiet. So whenever we do see tremor kick up right now, it's triggering earthquake activity upstream. So I think things are really locked here across this area and building up quite a bit of strain across the southern edge of the Cascadia subduction zone. 3.1 Washington earlier this morning. Still some microquake activity out here across Mount St. Helens. I don't think we're looking at anything new yet as far as any developing signs of volcanic activity. One earthquake, like I mentioned, north of Salina, Kansas. Beautiful state of Kansas. I love it up there. Around the Smoky Hills, 3.4 earthquake occurring out here. Far as the satellite imagery goes, it's hard to tell on this map if we got any type of, pumping operations or wastewater disposal facilities or, maybe fracking operations. I'm not really seeing it specifically. This earthquake occurred underneath this, it almost looks like some farmhouses out here in this region. Bennington, Kansas, a 3.4, 8.5 kilometers underneath this area. A little bit of movement down in Oklahoma as well. So things look like they're stressed out here across the North American plate. Question is, how stressed? It's not always going to be quiet, folks. Not always going to be peachy and just, a beautiful sunny day. These the plate tectonics out here do happen in terms of large-scale movement, and there's many different areas of hazards out here across the North American plate. The West Coast is the prime area, and just be on guard out here. I'm out here, so I have to be on guard. Quite a few ones and twos out there in Pecos, Texas area. Outside of Pecos, Texas, oil fields kicking off pretty nicely. A little bit of movement up here prior to the subduction zone. Now, this is pretty interesting because when we see a little bit of earthquake activity here on the oceanic crust right before the subduction zone level begins, well, that tells me right there that strain is definitely increasing across this area. The question is this completely locked up here in terms of the strain? Watch this area pretty closely. Alaska can see some big-time earthquakes. The Big Island of Hawaii, man, quite the earthquake swarm here in the last hour or so. Let me see what we got. I didn't mean to pull that one out. I was going to look at the Hot Capes Hawaii station. There's a little spike there on Mount St. Helens. That's one station I forgot to add. Gosh darn it. So we'll have to add the Hawaii station back up here because things look like they're getting very interesting up here across the Kilauea volcano right now. Quite a few ones and twos stirring up out here south of the Kilauea crater area. So let's go check it out. I don't think we got anything new to report in terms of volcanic activity. The daily update this morning just basically said the same thing that it's been saying. Blah, blah, blah. Things are coming and going. They're inflating. They're deflating. There's earthquake activity, but there's still magma, obviously, well below the surface. Yeah, well, not well below, but just below the surface here. And the inflation data tells us a story of the amount of magma potentially brewing underneath this region. Now, the past 2 days here, seen a little dip, but we've come up a little bit in the inflation data. But overall, the trend here, it almost looks identical to this last episode here. A day or so of inflation followed by very minimal deflation. Got a triple point here. We'll see if that takes place in this one as well. I'd like to know what's causing that specifically. It's very interesting here to watch that. What would be causing these little periods here of inflation? Obviously magma, but why the trend? Trends, there's got to be a reasoning behind that. It's kind of crazy. Either way, we'll continue to watch that and report back on it. There's definitely some earthquake activity occurring tonight, as we've seen there on the USGS map. Keep an eye on Hawaii. A lot going on out here. We got some big-time earthquake movement here across the northern Mariana Islands. The latest one at 5.0. A little bit of earthquake activity further south here. But still, along this area, if you really think about it, here's the plate boundary of the Pacific to the east and the Filipino plate right here. This is a very small plate, Filipino plate. Major stress builds up here in this area from the west, or it's from the east here, but it's heading towards the west-northwest, a Pacific plate movement towards the northwest. Now, definitely leading me to believe that there's some incredible strain out here. We've seen that earthquake swarm a month or so ago here at the Izu Islands. Now we're seeing, kind of a big time deal here around the northern Mariana Islands as well. It did start off this morning with a 6.9, so maybe this is just aftershock activity, maybe not. But keep an eye on this region here. The Kurokamachaka Trench is just ghostly quiet. It's unreal that it's so quiet right now. And that has some big time potential there, producing some megaquake activity. 5.3 down around Papua New Guinea, it looks like. One of these quakes right here. Well, 5.1 according to the USGS. Not a whole lot of activity here across the New Zealand area northward. In fact, this is our quiet zone for now. Yeah, a little bit we had a 4.9 there late last night, it looks like. I think that was late last night. Actually, this one shows it was earlier this afternoon. So I'm not for sure what's going on with the ring color here. Maybe we're off a little bit in terms of the amount of earthquake activity on the globe. We'll have to adjust that there just slightly. But either way, it is more quiet than normal across this area. Again, keep an eye on this region, Western Pacific. A little bit of a teeter-totter effect going on here between both sides here. Got Alaska up there in the middle as well. Just pretty active right now, folks, in terms of potential movement. South America region, quite a few 2s and 3s, and even a 4-pointer out there in the Peru-Chile Trench. Mediterranean, look at this. This has gone, goodness, it has gone super duper quiet. As far as anything going on, and I'm really surprised we're not seeing more out there, but we'll keep an eye on it. It's awfully quiet, and of course Iceland going on. I do have an Iceland station up there being monitored. This is the one that's actually offline. Imagine that. Up here across this area of Iceland. So we'll see if I can reset it maybe tomorrow, unless it comes back tonight. A couple spikes showing up there on Mount St. Helens. You guys see that? Right here. So some very small microquake activity. That could be general stress up here against the western areas of the North American plate. Again, this activity here, got to keep an eye on that. It's right there on the sleeping giant, so to speak. The Cascadia is no joke, folks. A lot of people think of the West Coast. Well, we got the San Andreas Fault. That's a big fault out there. They're going to have a big earthquake one day. Well, yeah, they're going to have an 8.1, but imagine a 9-pointer up here across Cascadia. It's a lot more damaging, and you got the tsunami potential as well. So this area, I think, is more concerning right now with the elevated activity here at the southern end of the Cascadia subduction zone. Tremor map, well, not Tremor, but Yellowstone National Park. Not a whole lot of activity out here locally to the Wyoming area. Maybe a handful of earthquakes earlier, a spike or two there. But for the most part, things are generally quiet there across Yellowstone National Park. No major swarms going on here. SFI is getting up there. It's gone down slightly, but still up there, elevated around 178. That's the energy, so to speak, in terms of the sunspot activity. And there's still quite a bit. Now, a lot of these are well in position of where they are currently facing the Earth dead on. So if anything does blast off from any of these sunspots here, and there's quite a few of them, that will be no doubt geo-effective here. Still watching this region up here on this this local sunspot area. Still got some dynamics within this region. And of course down here, this area looks pretty dynamic. We haven't really seen anything. I thought for sure we were going to see a major flare earlier because this region right here was forming this huge magnetic arch here across this area, and it looked like it wanted to pop, but it pretty much calmed down. It looked like this, but maybe 10 times as brighter and stronger in terms of the energy that was being produced here. But it went away, and we'll just kind of keep an eye on these areas. Right now, there's still a 99% chance for a C flare, M flare at 60, X flare around 10% chance or so. Proton event somewhat elevated as well. That's due to the elevated sunspot number and energy potential out here on the sun. No major coronal holes facing us. No major CMEs have been produced. So right now, the 3-day looks quiet. That's a forecast, but look at right now. getting some active conditions here across the polar region. So I don't think they called for this. Crazy how this stuff just pops up out of the blue. But Alaska, Canada, man, you guys look like they're getting some good auroras up there currently. So keep an eye on that. That was not forecasted here. For the most part, it looks like only a 2 to 3, but things change, right? In terms of the BT-BZ component, might have a little southward tilt there, allowed more of the normal solar wind to flow in than normal, I guess. I guess that's the word I'm looking for. Either way, these things kind of come and go. The sun definitely getting pretty active. We'll keep an eye on that. Weather outlook here tonight. Well, let's see what we got. I'm kind of watching the West Coast. I'm going to put this into motion here and just look at the weekend. The remainder of the weekend, there's some snow. Colder temperatures stretching into Oklahoma. Is that snow coming into Oklahoma? I got to look at that here real quick and see what's going on. For the windy map. Yes, they do get some ice storms and stuff like that. They're pretty lucky. I know, right? I'm crazy thinking that I would love an ice storm. Well, I would love an ice storm because I've never actually never experienced it. New snow out here. This is pretty impressive across Kansas and Oklahoma. Let's see temperature levels there. Yeah, there's definitely a huge cold front coming in. Up into maybe my home state area, Nebraska, Kansas, maybe South Dakota. I'm looking at this area potentially for some relocation and, some settling down, getting out of California. I want some real weather, and man, these guys are getting some real winter weather, it looks like. Major cold front coming in, it looks like, across a good portion of the west. Here in the Sacramento Valley. Yeah, we're still a little bit warmer than your typical regions out there that get this cold area. But let me see here what we got as we head into next week. Next week looks fairly minor. Not a whole lot going on. We are watching a couple systems here across the West Coast. Not a big one right there. That's not a big one coming into Wednesday. Those are maybe some precipitation and showers down into Southern Cal. But man, these things change left and right. It's crazy. I was looking at this a couple days ago, and it showed massive amounts of precipitation totals here for California, and that just completely diminished. It's a little depressing. But hopefully it comes in. Hopefully we get our storms because it's wintertime and we're supposed to get rain out here in California. This is when we get our rain. And, of course, El Nino coming up. Goodness. Well, we're in El Nino, so we should be getting some good time storms here soon. Lots of precipitation. Hopefully. Fingers crossed. I mean, it just seems like every time I mention it, it goes away. Similar to the sunspot activity, right? I don't know if you guys noticed that trend, but every time I look at a sunspot and say that it looks potential for some solar flare activity, the next day it goes away. So maybe I should just stop reporting. That would not be good. Maybe it's a way I'm observing it. I think maybe I need to look at it in a little bit different perspective. So maybe we'll try that tomorrow. All right, folks, I'm out of here. It's kind of late out here. It's actually midnight right now, California time. Mount St. Helens, still seeing a little bit of spiky earthquake activity. And the rest of the graphs, though, look pretty quiet. We'll see you guys tomorrow, Saturday. Well, technically, right now it's Saturday, so we'll see you guys a little bit later on this morning. Have a good one. Have a good night. Stay safe. Be prepared. We'll see you guys soon.